There are things that we just can't control. And we try. A good priest friend of mine, I think I've told you this before, he tells me that I'm very bad at playing God. And that's true about us all. But without these places where it just becomes absolutely clear that the way I'm doing it doesn't work, without those places, I would just continue to try to manage and control. That in the end is pride. And that's what he wants to keep us away from. Now, this does not mean he is sadistic and likes to see us suffer. That's not the case. What it does mean is we will suffer. We will be hurt. We will be harmed. And we will try to play God. And so he will use our sufferings to help us realize that he alone is the solution. He alone is the one where we find healing and transformation. I'd like to relate the story of the saint, one of the saints that we celebrated yesterday, Saint Josephine Bakhita. She died in 1947. Some of you may know her story, but I was rereading it. It's such a beautiful story, but it was very apropos here. She was born in Sudan at about the age of 7, and she says that the beginning of her life was very happy and very carefree and very loving. At about the age of 7, she was kidnapped by Arab traders and marched 600 miles across the desert, barefoot, and sold into slavery. She was actually sold multiple times on that trip. She was sold at first, and many times she changed hands, and that itself, slave markets are not nice things, especially for little 7-year-old girls. In fact, she was so traumatized by her kidnapping and those first months that she forgot her name. That's a real thing. If you talk to psychologists, when certain trauma is so great, people can forget who they are. So she even forgot the name her parents gave her. She was eventually sold to a general and his family, and they did terrible torture, cutting her and pouring salt on those wounds. There are 144 cuts on her body. She was beaten to the point of she could not walk. She was whipped, she said, every single day. She was eventually sold to an Italian family who were not really practicing Catholics, but they eventually took her to Italy. And the way that kind of worked was the family had to go back to sell some stuff and to do some stuff in Africa, and she was left at a sister's convent, the Canossian Sisters of Charity. And it was there that she was kind of introduced to the Lord. There had been a person in Africa before she even left who was a good practicing Catholic, who was a friend of this Italian family. He was also Italian. And he had given her a little crucifix. And she talks about that little crucifix, and she said, she looked at it and she said that she remembers as a little child knowing and seeing the stars and the beauty of creation and knowing there must be somebody behind it. And when she saw that crucifix, she said in a certain way she knew that was the one behind all that beauty. Eventually, she went to the sisters, and when that family came back to take her from the sisters, she didn't want to go. And the sisters went to court to free her from slavery, and they enlisted the help of the then Cardinal Archbishop Patriarch of Venice. His name was Cardinal Giuseppe Sarto, eventually Pope St. Pius X. And they won her freedom, and Josephine was baptized and confirmed in her first Holy Communion by Cardinal Giuseppe Sarto. She entered the sisters and professed her religious vows and lived there until her death in 1947. But there are some unbelievable quotes, and I would encourage you to read her life. I can't go on forever. One of the quotes, and I think is so apropos our gospel today, this idea of the wheat and the weeds. She said, "If I met my kidnappers today, or even the people who tortured me, I'd kneel down and kiss their hands and thank them. Because without them, I wouldn't know the love of my Christ." The torture and what she went through eventually caught up to her, and she was in a lot of pain for a lot of years of her life. She was very loved in the town. They had some very beautiful, affectionate names for her. But she would be asked, "How are you today?" And her response was always, "Just as my Jesus was." Pretty extraordinary. I think it's such a beautiful example of our Lord using even the worst and most terrible things, human trafficking, slavery, torture, to bring a soul to Him. Nothing is out of the realm of His power to bring us to that peace and that healing and that transformation that each of us desires. So, if we see weeds in our lives, and we all will, let's not see them as ways that Christ isn't there, but rather ways that He's inviting us to Him, to come closer to Him, to be more open to His work in our lives, just as St. Josephine did. And her last words that are recorded were, Our Lady, Our Lady. If only those could be ours. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost.